As-Salamu Alaykum. As-Salamu Alaykum. As-Salamu Alaykum. Peace be upon you. Welcome to another evening of Learning Islam with Masjid As-Sabur, Sacramento. We are located at 4920 15th Avenue in Sacramento, California. Please come out and join us. As always, we begin with the greetings of all of the prophets from Abraham to Muhammad, the greetings of peace. I'd like to again begin by stating clearly, I openly declare my allegiance to Almighty God Allah and to His Messenger. This evening we have a very special guest with us, Imam Abu Qadir Al-Amin, the head of the San Francisco Islamic Center and one of our pioneers and one of the brothers that I have learned from my whole life. And we want to welcome him. We're going to be talking today about the hope of Ibrahim or Abraham. You know, it's interesting that as we as people have grown up, the more we grow up, the less we recognize our common roots. So it's a great thing to talk about Abraham today. Again, as we begin, we want to remind you as our audience that our devotion is to provide you with the best information we can about Al-Islam, and any mistakes are ours and not the fault of the religion. Imam Abu Qadir.
Assalamu alaikum, Imam Haazim. Thank you so much for having me on your show this evening.
Wa alaikum assalam. No, I am privileged. You know, I learn every time you speak, so it's always a great opportunity to have you come and discuss the religion of Islam with us.
Yes, it's a blessing to be in the city of Sacramento. Sacramento is a very special place. I remember coming here for the first time when I was in the 4th grade, going to Sutter's Fort and going on a little field trip, and Sacramento has always had a fond memory in my heart.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
I remember the first time I got lost in Sacramento. But no, it's good that we can get you back. Imam Abu Qadir has driven all the way up from San Francisco to be with us, so we want to make sure that we get the opportunity to hear the wisdom that you wanted to share with us.
Yes. Yes, regarding the subject, our subject for this evening is the hope of Abraham. And Abraham, as we know, is revered and respected by the 3 major religions, that is the religion of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. All of us look to the prophetic figure, the great patriarch Abraham, as the father of our religion. So I thought it would be appropriate for us to talk, especially this being the month of Dhul Hijjah, where pilgrims from all over the world are visiting Mecca and visiting the house that Abraham and his son Ismail built for the worship of one God, and how that is a centerpiece that attracts people from all over the world to come and commemorate the great work of Abraham. And as we reflect over it, we know there are lessons that we can learn from studying his life, because in the Quran it says that God gave Abraham to us as a model community, that he was a ummah, he was a community, and we see that other communities have patterned their life after Abraham, who devoted his life to serving God and to serving humanity. And we hope to see that realized. There's still a need for human beings to commit themselves to serving God in a rational way. And Abraham was a man that was rational. Practically every depiction of Abraham that's given to us, especially in the Quran, points to his ability to think and reason. Even as a young boy, when he grew up in a society where they worshipped idols, they manufactured idols. His father was in the idol manufacturing business, And Abraham, as a young man, he reasoned that it was something wrong with making a god in the morning out of wood or whatever they crafted it with, and then making requests to that god in the evening. He said that just didn't make sense to him. So he questioned and he argued and he reasoned with the people that it was something wrong with false worship. And then there's one report that is given that Abraham actually, as a youth, and you know, young people are a little more daring than people who have more life experience, so they may involve themselves in what we call risky behavior. So he actually went into the place where the idols were kept and broke all of the idols except one. And then he hung an axe over the neck of the big idol, hung the axe over the neck of the big idol. And when the people came into their place of worship and saw the destruction of the idols, they said, "Oh, who could have done such a terrible thing?" And they began to discuss it among themselves and say, "Remember, there was a youth named Abraham who was discussing this with us." So they went and got him and brought him to the scene and questioned him about the idols and asked, did he break them? And he actually didn't lie, but he was crafty. He pointed to the idol with the axe around his neck and said, "This one did it," as he held up the right hand that he broke them with. So he was crafty. He was strategic. And then he said, "Well, why don't you ask the big one if it can speak intelligent?" And it says they were confounded and knew that their ways were erroneous. However, they still persecuted him and threw him in the fire because he was upsetting the status quo. They were in business of making idols. Those idols supported their economy, and he was actually challenging that order. And we know that he had to leave that society and go elsewhere.
Now, what happened when they threw him in the fire?
Well, according to the scripture, it said God gave a command to the fire to be cool and a means of safety for Abraham. Now, was it a literal fire? We don't know if it was a literal fire, but we know that human beings can be fired up with passions. And if I can bring a little humor into it, right now, San Francisco is fired up because the Giants won. And in the heat can of their ignorance, in their celebration last night, they started some fires. So sometimes, you know, fires can be used for destructive purposes, and sometimes the purpose of firing up people's passions against you may turn against the one who's trying to incite other people against you. So perhaps in that case, Abraham, the people were trying to be provoked, to be angry with him, to be upset with him. And God made that cool in a place of safety for him. And there are miracles that happen. So that's one of the miracles in the Quran. We're not saying we don't believe that the fire was cool for him. We're saying that that's one of the miracles. So he wasn't damaged when he was put in the fire.
That's very interesting. You know, one of the other things is that every one of the religions you mentioned, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, has the same saying about Abraham: "Peace be unto our father Abraham."
Right. Well, that's a universal greeting. That's a universal need. Human beings have a need for peace in their soul, peace in their environments. We want to have peace in our society. And Abraham, he actually realized that type of peace. He struggled against those forces that were in conflict with his nature, his upright nature, his desire to serve God in a sensible way. And he overcame all of those challenges, which is the aim and the purpose of Hajj. That is, us making pilgrimage and visiting the house that Abraham and his son Ismail built. Our aim is to make our life pleasing before God. We're trying to present ourselves before God as obedient servants of His without allowing any of the distractions in the environment to get in our way. Whether those distractions be our own lower desires, our own ignorance, or our societal customs, or the environment that we grew up in, or even the temptations that the forces of evil may have placed in our way. We are striving and aiming to present ourselves before God as obedient servants of His. And Abraham was successful in accomplishing that. He fulfilled the commands that God placed on him, and all of us who follow his tradition, our hope is to present ourselves before God in that way as well. And in one place in the Quran it says that God said of Abraham that he would make him a leader for the nations. And Abraham prayed and said, and also make that promise for my offspring. And God says, yes, but my promise is not within the reach of those who do wrong or who are oppressive. So he encouraged and he hoped for leadership in those who follow him. And we find that that leadership has been realized. Among Jews, Christians, and Muslims, we have still contributed greatly to societal upliftment with the principles of our religion and our faith and the universal standards that we uphold of kindness, justice, fairness, being at peace with our neighbors, being generous to our guests. All of these are universal values and principles that we hold dear and that we see enacted on a daily basis, not just during the ritual season of Hajj on the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th of Dhul Hijjah, but we see these carried out on a day-to-day basis.
Now, I just have to back you up for a moment. When the pilgrimage is made, don't we go to something called the Kaaba?
Right. The Kaaba is, according to Muslim belief, the first place, a house, that was built exclusively for the worship of the one God, that is the creator of the heavens and the earth. And it's said in Islamic traditions that the Prophet Abraham was seeking a sign from God as to where he should construct this house. And a meteorite came down from the sky. And that meteorite is what we now know as the black stone, which serves as the cornerstone of this house. And he put that black stone there as a answer to what he was praying for and asking God for. And also Adam and Eve are associated with that house as well. And it says that Abraham actually raised up the foundation that was already there, earlier constructed by the prophet Adam. That's a part of our belief. But him and his son Ismail, they raised up the Kaaba. They established it as a place of worship for the one God, Allah. And at the time that it was established, many people weren't coming there. But it became to be a place where people made pilgrimage to, and that tradition carries on up until today. As a matter of fact, people are still in Mecca right now. I believe this is the Friday was the 10th, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. This is the 13th of Dhul Hijjah. So those people who are still there and who didn't leave the sacred precincts, they're still stoning the Jamarat, symbolically stoning the devil, the symbolic pillars of stoning the devil, which is a constant effort. It's a lifelong effort. You have to fight against the influence of Shaitan, we call him. We reject him, and we make efforts against his strategies, which are to despoil the good nature of human beings and to cause us to fall into disfavor with God.
Now I gotta back you up. You mentioned that we stone the Shaitan.
Yes, we throw symbolic pebbles at three structures in Mecca called Jamarat, which are pillars that are placed that symbolize the trials that Abraham experienced in his life that were orchestrated by the devil. And we all have challenges in our life that we have to face and we have to make an effort to defeat those evil influences that may afflict our life. I would say drug addiction, alcoholism, crime, lying, stealing, being unfaithful, all the cheating, all of those kind of evils we have to resist, and we have to make an effort to eradicate them, not only from our individual lives but from our society, because those are things that corrupt the social fabric of human beings.
So symbolically, when one is making the pilgrimage and one goes to these 3 stone structures, one is symbolically fighting that evil, right, as represented by those structures.
Right, and it's a symbolic gesture. We throw 49 stones. 49 stones. I would say we throw 7 at each pillar. And you do it until you've thrown the whole 49 stones. Each day you have throw a certain number, and then I believe it's on the last day you throw at the big one. You throw the last 7, and then that concludes that particular rite. But I think also it may be connected with in the Bible, the Jews, they celebrate what they call a jubilee, the 49th year. You know, and I think that 49 is symbolic of that. It's connected with that jubilee. We should celebrate overcoming evil and overcoming opposition in our life. It's something to be celebrated, and we should have a big celebration about our victories in life. Not only small victories like getting a job, getting a new car. We should celebrate victories when we have decent neighborhoods, when we have our children graduating from school and having a 99.9 graduation percentage, as opposed to saying we got 30% of our children graduating from schools. No, we need more victories like that, where we're encouraging and inspiring our young people to aspire for the good life, for the rational life. Like Abraham, he was a rational person. He sought understanding. He was given insight into the workings of the heavens and the earth. That means that he had a scientific mind. You know, he wanted to understand, how do things happen? What are the forces behind this? What causes the sun to rise from the east? What is it? What's behind the brightness of the moon and the shining stars? He was looking behind those, and he came to understand that there was a force greater than those things, which was responsible for all of those things.
Now, I gotta do this before we go.
Yes.
When we bring up Abraham, we just had the Muslim celebration of the Feast of Sacrifice. In Arabic, it's called Eid al-Adha.
Yes.
And this celebrates Abraham. What part of his life does this celebrate?
Abraham, at one stage in his life, he was an older man. He desired a son. He desired a child. He didn't have offspring. He was married to Sarah. This is according to the biblical tradition, the Jewish tradition, and also the Muslim tradition. And his wife permitted him to marry an Egyptian by the name of Hajar. We say Hagar in the Bible. In the English language, we say Hagar. And he married her, and she birthed him a son. And as a result of that, it created some tension between Sarah and Hagar, and she got a little dissatisfied and wanted him to move her away from them. So he actually moved Hagar and her son Ismail into the desert where the Kaaba is near now. He left him there on the instruction of God. God told him to take them there and leave them there. And part of the Hajj rites is running between the hills of Safa and Marwa, as Hagar did. And then at one point, not at that stage in his life, because the Hajj really represents a lifetime of struggle. It's not 5 days. 5 days is the symbolic ritual that we go to remember the lifelong struggle. But at a later time in Ismail's life, when his son had become a young boy, he was told in a vision that he had to sacrifice his son. Now imagine a man having a son after having not had any children. Then God says you have to sacrifice that son. So he told his son. His son wanted to know, where are we going? He said, well, God has given me this vision. We're going to make a sacrifice today. So on the way there, of course, this is biblical narration now. And the Quran shares more insight, but I'll give you that narration first. It said, on the way there, he said, the boy Ismail said, well, where's the lamb that we're going to sacrifice? We got the wood and we got all the other stuff, but where's the lamb we're going to sacrifice? They said, well, God told me to sacrifice you. And the boy was of such a obedient son, he said, well, if that's God, what God wants, then okay. And then he got there and he said, but this is Islamic tradition now. I'm interweaving them. He said, well, we'll cover my eyes because I don't want to see the knife. And then at that point, the angel came to Abraham and said, you've already fulfilled the vision. What God wanted you to do was be willing to obey him in everything. But he didn't want him to sacrifice his son. He wanted him to be willing to do that, but not to actually do it. So in his place, he was told to sacrifice a lamb. Some say the biblical tradition says he was to sacrifice a ram. Others say a lamb. And then Imam Deputy Muhammad said the animals that we sacrifice on Hajj, during that period, we sacrifice lamb, we sacrifice goat, we sacrifice cows, we sacrifice camels. He said these are symbolic of characteristics that human beings may take on that we really should sacrifice. We shouldn't be too sheepish. You know, the sheep is symbolic of a docile animal. We won't make it far in the world if we're too docile. And then we also sacrifice goats, who are very stubborn animals, and sometimes that's a characteristic that they can get in the way of our growth and our development. And then the cow is sometimes a little too just content to chew his cud and, you know, just chew and look sad. And that's also a tendency that we have to sometimes sacrifice. And the camel is a very conceited animal. It's always looking at itself, you know. And that's another characteristic. We can't fall too much in love with ourselves. So this has been incredibly enlightening.
I want to, I know we're getting ready to run out of time, but I want to make sure that we're going to do a part 2, because I think there's even more for us to explore in this discussion of Ibrahim and how he gives us symbolically a direction and a motivation for growth that I think is critical to our society's improvement.
Certainly.
So, I want you to hold on. We're going to bring you back for part 2. I want to remind everyone we are 4920 15th Avenue, Sacramento, California. You can come by and see the development of a new structure there. God has blessed us that we are building a new facility, and we are inviting everyone to come and join with us. God willing, sometime next year we'll be having a groundbreaking and opening, and it is just going to be wonderful. But I also want to remind everyone, whenever you want to learn about Islam, go talk to Muslims. There's so much misinformation on the internet, so many lies being told. You need to talk to the people who actually practice this religion on a daily basis. And I also want to remind you that our show comes on twice a month. If you have questions, our website is www.masjidassabur.org. If you have phone calls, please call our masjid. We are located at 4920 15th Avenue, Sacramento, California, and we are always willing to accept your questions. We have Jummah prayer every Friday at 1:30 p.m. year-round, and on Sundays we have our Islamic studies classes at 11 a.m. every Sunday. And once a month, we as a community go to help feed the homeless at Loaves and Fishes. We do that on the 4th Sunday of every month. We can always use extra hands, and it is a great opportunity for you to see the blessing that God has given you, and that you don't have to be homeless. So please come and join with us. Sometimes it's critical for us to see how little others have compared to the blessings that we take for granted. But again, we want to thank Imam Abu Qadir Al-Amin for his wonderful message. We want to say we're going to continue this, so don't go away. Watch the next show. But the other thing we also want to do is remember to remind you that God does have a plan for your life, and don't ever give up hope of God's mercy.
That's right.
You know, we have a problem in our community, both Christian and Muslim and Jewish to a degree, in that we think that God only wants to punish us. No, He wants us to grow and develop and become the human being that He has laid out in His prophets, and especially in His prophet Ibrahim. I'd like to close as I open with the greetings of all of the prophets, from Abraham to Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings be upon you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.